Welcome back to the Geekscape Book Club. It might feel like we're just returning after a brief commercial break, but it's been a moment. And we are back with Dark Web, which we'll talk about in a moment. I'm Christian Bladt. Look over that way, right there. It's old webhead himself, Count Eric Conner. How are you, sir?
I am doing well. How are you doing this fine, whatever date we're supposed to say it is?
No, it's all right. It's live. People listen to the archive afterwards, and I would say that shockingly, both my professional life and personal life are at a 9. So yeah,
Fantastic.
so very excited to be able to report that. So Dark Web is one of the newest storylines that we've tackled, and I stumbled across it because they had it at our local library where we recommend everybody look for any of the books that we do here on the show. So this is so recent is that it was originally published in 2022, and the trade paperback that I read for Dark Web was released in 2023. So it lists itself as a spiritual successor to Inferno from the late 80s, which was a massive Marvel crossover back when those were still relatively new. That it was after Secret Wars 2, but they started doing these every year in the pages of X-Men books, and sometimes they started bringing in others. But that Inferno, I am a much bigger fan of, but I found some interesting quirks to this story. Eric, does your comic book lineage contain the original Inferno? Is that something you had read previously?
I believe I have not. So I was kind of relatively new to all this, and this is really recent. So
Yeah,
it's interesting because I feel like you almost could see the effects of the movies on the storytelling
I
here.
think that's fair. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and this is so recent from the X-Men point of view. This is the beloved when it started, but somewhat controversial Krakoa era that I was not interested in. When it started, I had somebody explain it to me, and I go, "Yeah, that's not for me." I might have even said, "That sounds stupid." So I just, look, I wasn't into it. I hope that people who did enjoy it were able to enjoy it. I just didn't like the entire concept of it. But I did find it interesting, kind of checking in with these characters that I have loved for most of my life and getting to see where they were at. And neither you nor I are really up on our current Marvel continuity. I have read some newer Spider-Man books in the last 5+ years. This run of Amazing Spider-Man that Zeb Wells started, I did read the first few issues because John Romita Jr. was coming back to Amazing to do the art. So, but there's some little quirks and tweaks, and I guess one of the fundamental questions is, when you started reading this, did you know who Ben Reilly was prior to that?
Yes, I do, and I
Okay.
would say I owe that to you. I think you've brought many wonderful things into my life.
Skull!
Goal. You've brought many wonderful things, including can I say it's safe to say a distrust of Ben,
Yeah.
maybe a displeasure of Ben.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so when Ben appears, I know somewhere there's a maybe not an angry Christian. I don't know if it's enough to anger you, but an annoyed Christian Blatt. And
Yeah.
so as soon as I saw who was there, I'm like, oh yes, I know about this guy. So I actually so thank you for giving me my bona fide geekdom enough so that I could understand who this guy was, and that a lot of
Yeah.
fans hate him.
Yeah. And because as a fan of wrestling, you'll appreciate
Of
the
course.
terminology that Ben Reilly did a pretty hardcore heel turn. This story touches on it a little bit as to some of it. And the problem, look, I'm talking about calling an entire era of X-Men that many people liked. I called it stupid. I also feel that the idea of Ben Reilly was stupid because it goes back to like Amazing Spider-Man 150 from the early 70s. There's the original clone saga. And Peter thinks that he might actually be a clone. And then throughout the course of the story, he's like, no. I know who I am. I'm the real me. And he throws away the test results from Dr. Connors, a.k.a. the Lizard.
No relation.
Not to you, but to the
me.
Lizard, yes. So, and he doesn't read them. And so then they decide, actually, that Peter, who we've been reading since 1972, he was the clone. And Ben Reilly's the original. Now, they've switched this a couple of times. Like, just like how the Aunt May who died in Amazing Spider-Man 400 turned out to be an actor hired by Norman Osborn. It's tough when you have like 900 issues, and that's just the one title.
And sometimes you think that maybe Vince McMahon actually was one of the editors of Marvel. Like, the logic gets very the wrestling versus comic book. Yeah. When you pitch there's a very thin line there, and I'm not sure what side of the line we're on.
Yeah. So basically, at this era that we're about, and look, we can't catch up on 80 plus years of Marvel continuity in the course of these first few minutes. But basically, Ben Reilly at this point in the story is Hollywood Hogan. So he's this is my limited wrestling knowledge.
And I think you put your disease in me, and I put my disease in you. Don't read too deep into that, family audience.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is very much. This is NWO Hogan. This is the one who turned on all his fans because he felt betrayed by them, and he realized there was a lot more money in being bad.
Yes, it is exactly what happened. And interestingly, Madeline Pryor, the Goblin Queen, the big bad of the initial Inferno, kind of has not come to Jesus, but like come to Xavier moment, kind of halfway through the story. And I was like, I don't like this. I like her as a bad guy.
Also, there was a moment there where I'm like, did I miss a chapter or a title? Because I felt like suddenly she did a face turn. Yes, wrestling terminology is alive and well here. She did a face turn, but I'm like, wait, what happened? And she's like, oh,
what happened?
What happened? Jean Grey, said, hey, we're friends, and here's memories. But even before that moment, where that one, at least, it was actually like an entire issue dedicated to it, and it worked.
Yeah.
But there was a moment, do you know what I'm talking about? About halfway through.
I do, and I'm not sure that the trade paperback collects everything that was in the story. So sometimes that can be a little bit of an issue. Like when I read Crisis on Infinite Earths, it collected the 12 issues and none of the crossovers. And for the most part, it works. There are a couple of times where you go like, well, where'd that guy go? And oh, so we're just doing this thing right now. And I do appreciate not making these things into omnibuses, because this collects. So there were 2 one-shots. Their Dark Web was bookended by Dusk and Dawn, and then it was an Amazing Spider-Man. But then it also went over to Venom, and we do read a Venom story. But I feel like they kind of backtrack. It's almost like a Quentin Tarantino movie. You're like, oh, we're backing up to go to the Venom story.
Very cubist.
Yeah, and there was a limited series called Gold Goblin, Mary Jane and Black Cat, Dark Web Ms. Marvel, and Dark Web X-Men. There's also issues of Amazing Spider-Man. They had a Dark Web finale and multiple Dark Web Ms. Marvel, and lots of crossovers. And I think that they skipped some stuff along the way. There was only so much.
That would make sense. In fact, in some ways, now you say it, it's like, well, duh. Yeah, of course. Right. How did I even not put one and one together? It's like, yeah, because there's definitely some holes along the way. Although I do think this collection did a nice job of threading a fair amount of it together.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't minded. Weirdly enough, I just saw the tennis movie Challengers, which was non-linear, and they did a really nice job of sort of keeping you straight on where you were in the timeline. So, and it was very simple, just a little title saying, 5 years ago, 2 months ago, last
Yeah.
night, and then honestly, it needed that. And it just so you're not sitting there, kind of, where are we in this? And I think like that might have helped, honestly, if even like once you make a collection of it, it's not such a crime to say, here we are in the timeline. Let's go back a step before we go a step forward, because that actually would have helped with some of it. But I think this one, it wasn't too confusing because we always sort of understood, okay, there was kind of like a big key climax that this was all going to be going towards. And by having them go into limbo, it's kind of like what they did with the original Secret Wars. Like you just kind of go somewhere else and you come back, and it might have been a week, it might have been a month, it might have been 5 years. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, no, I think that that can be very helpful. And I think a lot of times when you get that stuff in a movie, and especially in some sci-fi and stuff, when they start telling you on screen where this is, even if it's a place you've already been, that somewhere a test audience was like, huh?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and it's some of what happens throughout the course of this is a little bit dense, and I want to try to kind of breeze past a lot of the backstory that was prior to this, but there's this Krakoa council basically can resurrect departed mutants, and they bring back Madeline Pryor to appease Havoc, who's Cyclops' brother, and she remembers being the Goblin Queen. So you start to
Mhm.
deal with stuff like that, and on the surface, this is a Spider-Man and X-Men crossover. So on the surface, I'm like, great. This is filled with characters that I like. I am able to mostly have fun with this. And as I often say when I'm picking up contemporary comic books that maybe I don't understand enough of the recent backstory, which drove me crazy when I was a kid. I needed
Oh
to know
yeah.
everything. You got to let it go, because
And
as
that's when you would write the letter. That's when,
to whom it may concern, yes,
dear Mr. S. Lee,
yeah, worst solo Avengers
ever.
ever. So yes, so in my old age, I've come to embrace the lyrics to the theme song from Mystery Science Theater 3000, which I often reference on these various shows. If you're wondering how he eats and breathes and other science facts, just repeat to yourself, it's just a show. I should really just
Just
relax.
relax.
These are just comic books. So enjoy the fun part. And if when you're done, you have a lot of questions, the magic of the internet is going to be able to clue you in. So we'll probably miss some various things that happen in this. And in full disclosure, I did read this like 2 months ago, but I do have good memories of what I read, especially basically one panel that I'm super excited about, and I could do the whole show on, but we'll get to that. Fortunately, when Eric reads, he sends me a lot of artwork and highlights from along the way,
Appropriate artwork, relevant
such as the mail carrier who wants to know why Spider-Man is defouling this
artwork.
mailbox, which happens to be possessed by a demon. So if you haven't read this story, you're already getting a vibe for what's going on. That's sort of
And that was
thing.
relatively early
Mm-hmm.
in
Yeah.
the series. And I was curious, sir. What was your take on all that? The inanimate objects coming to life and having like this sort of almost Ghostbusters esque vibe to them.
Well, I think that is what you get when you bring Spider-Man into this world. You kind of
Mhm.
need to have that feel. And in general, it's like, okay, it's silly. I don't know that I needed any of it. And by the way, shout out to our friend Katie Hampton, who, if she were on screen with us right now and saw my 18,821 unread messages, she would just be losing it right now. She'd be, clawing at her own skin to try and get out of the
She would
room.
enter limbo emotionally and physically.
So it's a little dopey, but it's also like, okay, in the context of the story, it kind of makes sense. It's definitely got a Gremlins vibe, it's like, naughty demons doing some naughty
Gremlins.
stuff.
I would argue Gremlins too. I
Oh,
think
the new batch. Yes. When they're smart. Yeah, that's
they're
true.
smart and it's very meta. And you got Hulk Hogan is part of Gremlins too.
Brother.
They were just 24-inch pythons. You can ruin my film. I like they did name checks to other superheroes like this one here. Able to get away in a single bound.
Yes.
That was kind of a nice little moment. I was very happy to see Firestar, Ice Storm, Spidey together.
We'll get to that.
That brought me great nachas.
So and you've got I assume this is Norman because I think Harry's dead. Yeah. Which when I was a kid, Harry was alive and Norman was dead. But these kids today with their alive Norman Osborn and their dead Harry Osborn, I don't even know.
You only get so many Osborns, and I thought he would have a bigger role in this actually, but I kind of like the wounded Norman Osborn. It was very morose, and then even him talking about kind of the idea it was a clone, but it was real to him, which is like an interesting theme throughout this whole run, and really what makes the two main villains sort of tick is the idea like, who am I? Am I real or not?
Yeah, and I think it's a great parallel because Madeline Pryor often has to deal with the fact of, am I real?
Are these my memories or someone else's?
Yeah, and Jean has to deal with that as well. It's something that I think they covered very well on X-Men 97, which we, of course, covered episode by episode on our show, Marvel Movie Talk, right here on the Geekscape Network for anybody that wants to check out our back catalog. MMT!
By the way, this band, I assumed because, Christian's very much into rock and hair metal. I assumed you interviewed the lead singer of Texas Tenenbaum at some point.
Yeah, it's actually a side project that has a couple of the guys from Faster Pussycat and some guys from Babylon AD, and I think somebody from Saigon Kick. I just wanted to name check 3 bands. We didn't rehearse that. I didn't have those written out.
No. The PR guy from Guar, I think, was also part of their package.
Ooh, now you're talking. Yes, but Texas Tenebrium. And, I think that we can talk a little bit about these visuals. This Golden Goblin character, I believe that's who that is, who's basically like female Hobgoblin. Yeah. I'm like, okay, I'm kind of into it. I like the look of the Hobgoblin. I mean, the Hobgoblin took the simple concept of Green Goblin, made him scarier and to me a little cooler because I started reading Spider-Man comics in the era of Hobgoblin. So Green Goblin was like the stuff of reprints and flashbacks. Right. And what were you going to say, sir?
Yeah, and when also one power she has when she has these different masks and she puts them on and keeps alluding to Frankenstein. And so she'll put on a wolf mask and become almost like a wolf man, or a Frankenstein mask and later become the monster. And I like the design of her. I agree, because I always found, I don't know, something to be said about like the more minimalist costumes too. Green Goblin was always sort of decked out to the nines, but Hobgoblin oftentimes, it was just kind of a scary hood. And, kind of the things unseen oftentimes can be much scarier.
Yeah. And, I think that I do like different bad guys conspiring together. There was a crossover event in the early 90s called was Acts of Vengeance. And it was a simple idea where all the supervillains were like, we're always tired of getting beat up by the same heroes that we always fight. So they went and fought different heroes for a change. So that's why you have the X-Men dealing with the Mandarin instead of Tony Stark. And there's the space for interesting things. So I think as cartoony as like your Legions of Doom or your Brotherhoods of Evil Mutants can be, I think that I kind of like that. I'm always a big fan of crossovers anytime that you can get it. And I'll always cite when we talk about crossovers the impact that the Flintstones Meet the Jetsons had on me. And
Wait, I like when villains sit at a table, like a conference table. That was one thing that was fun about the Legion of Doom. You got the sense they had agendas, and they parliamentary procedure, I assume. And then occasionally someone gets out of line, taking a cue from the Bond villains. You hit a button and they go away. And they get zapped, or in the case of Will Ferrell and Austin Powers, it takes a few times to finally kill him. And I like that. I like a little bit of like order to the lawless,
Yes, I agree. I do like getting some of that structure. That's fun. And this visual for our video audience, we've got Spidey kind of looking down at some inanimate objects that are possessed.
Oh, and he has a joke in the bubble where it's this is why I stay out of.
I never go to Rockefeller
Center
around Christmas. I once worked at Rockefeller Center as an NBC page.
Yes, you did.
And I would get questions that would be things. Usually the question was, where's the Christmas tree? And I would point right behind them because that's where it was. It was right behind them. If they just turned their head.
What's Christmas?
No, this is before the war on Christmas.
Oh, okay.
This is when we were still allowed to say Merry Christmas. But so I do enjoy Spidey's sense of humor. I think that they had to kind of deconstruct Venom a little bit, wanting to eat Spider-Man's brain because of the simple fact that he's a bit more anti-hero and more cuddly than he used to be in his heyday. But this version of him works better. But to your point, it's almost like, well, we need the movie Venom in this story. Is this a character that you felt like they really wanted to recapture the version that people know from the Tom Hardy movie?
It definitely had early on in the storytelling, quite cartoony. And even one thing that was fun that I kind of wish they would do in the movies is like these other smarter villains using him like a blunt object. It's like they kind of like they throw him off the side of the building, like, oh, let him go deal with it. He's their pawn, basically. But then they added an interesting complexity to him with his son, which I thought was like moments of humanity to him. That I thought, well, that's nice. Although good pickup of the baby here with the baby carriage ready to eat him.
Don't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Don't mean to interrupt. But can I taste your baby? Wait, I mean kiss. Can I kiss your baby?
Yeah,
that actually did make me laugh out loud, especially.
That was pretty funny. And then the mom, Harry, the stroller, tried to eat Tyler. Liar, you don't know that. Okay, fine, I did. So some of the humor worked.
Some of it's a little juvenile, and other times it wasn't. And I found that was kind of maybe the thing I bumped a little bit on in the read of this was I found the tone of this thing shifted really dramatically. Now that's inevitable. You have a crossover, different artists, different writers, different characters, different worlds. But I found like the humor, it was where I found it kind of like sometimes got a little kiddie, a little bit more like the Disney Channel, or I guess it was Disney Channel. I had like the old Iron Man cartoons, was a little bit. They were good, but they were a little bit more tailored towards a younger audience. I found some of the humor surprised me that it felt a little bit young, but then it would all of a sudden veer to something quite dark and actually unsettling. So I found like the tone of this thing was really kind of all over the map, which I suppose I don't mind, especially if you have your Miss Marvel fans are one sort of side of the playground, and then the Spidey fans are another. But I did find it maybe needed a little bit more of like a uniform vision at the center of it, even if you're allowing the individual artists to go and play around as they would.
Yeah, and I think that sort of in the heyday of what I'm talking about in terms of the 80s crossovers,
Mhm.
the main books would have some kind of, interconnectivity that you felt like what was happening in the pages of New Mutants and X Factor worked very well with what was happening in Uncanny. And then
Mhm.
there'd be sort of one-offs where they'd pop into like Power Pack and things like that, where the stories were less essential but very much relevant to what was
Boom.
actually happening. Power Pack #1 is not a crossover,
I
but
don't care.
yeah,
It was a
no,
good
no,
visual.
I'm glad you had it. It's never a problem when you've got the Power Kids. It's good that their last name was Power. It worked out perfectly that they became the Power Pack. So I thought that editorial handled that stuff better, I think, in those days,
Mhm.
but also the playing field was so much smaller when you had so many less titles,
Yeah.
and just sort of, there's also like 35 years of more mythos since then. The
Mhm.
legends have all expanded exponentially in that time. So I think that it's a little bit tougher to manage all of it. And this is an image that references what we were talking about, sort of the devolution, the disevolution. Don't take this the wrong way, but you sound dumber. We've never thought more clearly. And then, of course, this
What's
is
he
the.
What's he holding up?
I'm not actually sure what those
Damn
are.
it!
Those
So
are
the only reason
those.
I took the screen grab of this is it bacon slices? Is it leeches that
I
dried out after being salted?
see. I thought those were past costumes. That's what I thought when I read it, but now I don't know.
Well,
Uh,
those just look like meat hangers. Then I mean, that how
yeah.
you? I know that sometimes the costumes can grow and embiggen, but I didn't quite buy that.
No, I don't know that I did either, but I'm glad that Venom hasn't outsmarted high pitched sounds. That's something that continues to work, week to week, month to month.
And the idea that Christmas trees would have a particularly annoying high pitched sound.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, exactly. And,
Heard of the attack on Christmas?
exactly. Once again. And the Ben Riley versus Peter, uh, it's a bit of a letdown because I always feel like Peter's the real Spider-Man, so he should be able to, pummel any pretender to the throne. And let's kind of move on for a moment to. I think that that's the conclusion of the first package of images that were emailed to me. What's something that you want to tackle next while I load up the next batch?
All right. Well, one thing I found, weirdly distracting was I don't know, the Goblin Queen's how do I put it delicately? Her bosom seemed to
Yeah,
change in every single issue depending on who drew it. And there was one screen grab I got that was like, oh come on, and it's especially because we've had such wonderful talks about how characters are sexualized in Marvel. Via when we've talked about the Claremont
yeah,
run.
and yes, yeah. Go ahead. I'll finish your thought, but
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, like,
I think this
I
might be the image you were talking about.
oh
And
yeah,
it, and
yeah,
it,
yeah.
and even if it's not, it certainly. I was going to say it makes the point, but I guess it makes the points. What were you
Hey,
going to say? So yes, the sexualization. Uh, sort of it being the interesting combination of the Claremont run, where
right.
you have these strong, hugely empowered women that also are hugely endowed,
Yeah.
because of the nature of comic books.
And listen, I mean, they're the things we won't admit, right? As a 50-year-old married heterosexual male, do I mind this? On one hand, no. On this other hand, as a man who's trying to raise two sons to be respectful, not view women as just sexualized all the time, like, no, this is ridiculous. And I think also too, it particularly is because I wasn't thinking like the way they were drawn throughout the titles was completely like it didn't bring any real sort of attention to the sexuality. It was so much about power, so much about character. And so to have a moment like this, I was kind of like, oh come on. And really to think about how Chris Claremont's talked about how he was always pushing to give more agency to these female characters. And so the fact that this comic came out was, I'm so sorry, Christian, was it last year or the year before?
2022 was when
Okay.
the issues were published, and then the collection came out last year. Yeah.
Okay. So 2 years ago, I was I did shake my head at this moment because I it's kind of like I expected more, I have to say. And
Sure.
maybe it is because I'm not a young man no more, but I think what it does it hurts the storytelling. It's in essence pulling us out of the story in ways that completely this added nothing besides making maybe some horny folks a little happy for a panel.
Yeah.
But at what cost, Christian? At what
Well, it's a good
cost?
question. Now, look, I grew up in the age of the Marvel swimsuit special, so I think that
When are we going to have the Marvel movie talk swimsuit special? I've got a One Piece I've been ready to rock for a while now.
as soon as someone other than you expresses interest in the Marvel movie talk swimsuit special.
Now I just feel
So
small.
yeah, well, maybe I've been hitting the gym a lot, so maybe I'll be able to get out there sometime soon, and sometime in the near future. Look, it's not a bad point, and in so many ways, comic books are so much more evolved than when I was reading them as a kid.
Sure.
They're much more inclusionary. You're not skirting around is not the phrase that I intended, but you're not having to very subtly have characters with anything even approaching an alternative lifestyle. The fact that the story couldn't be told that Mystique was essentially Nightcrawler's father because she's a shapeshifter, and Destiny is basically his mother. That literally was never in print during the Claremont run because you couldn't tell the story that way. So you'd allude to things, and I don't think I ever even assumed it until Claremont actually explained to me in an interview, probably on this channel, and I'm like, oh. Yeah, all right. I guess that makes sense. So, it's very, so there's a lot of ways, but ultimately, I think that they know their core audience.
Right.
They are the young and also the young at heart. And I do understand this, these female characters, they're at least portrayed as strong women of differing degrees of character and power and abilities, and sometimes they need to basically put on a bustier and some kind of get up as if they were background on a Stanley Kubrick film from the early 2000s. So if you feel like your eyes are wide shut while you're reading this, then you're probably right.
Well, did you ever
go ahead.
see? It's sort of again, it's the other comic book publisher whose name we often do not mention, but when they did sort of a shot-to-shot comparison of how Wonder Woman was filmed when it was Patty Jenkins directing her in Wonder Woman 1 in '84,
And
and then versus Joss Whedon, Zack Snyder, and how they filmed her. And,
yeah,
and it's really fascinating because in some ways, like the costumes don't look that different, and yet you could tell the gaze is different behind the camera.
there are a lot more crotch shots, as I recall.
Yeah,
Upon rewatching the Snyder cut, I'm like, oh yeah, he does film her very differently.
yeah,
And look, there are some tremendous female characters in this story. Some of them are amongst my favorite characters. And we do get some Mary Jane. I'm a big fan of Magic with a K, Ileana Rasputin.
mhm.
We get some of her. This was something that you pulled, which I actually thought was fun. Sort of this Peter basically having the day-to-day monotony of working in hell, and sort of the devil kind of looking like Anger from the Inside Out films.
Yeah,
You know,
a touch of Hellboy maybe mixed in.
yeah, like, but it's like the Lewis Black character from those movies. He's just angry all the time.
It becomes like his normal too, which is kind of
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
some of that stuff was just so weird and kind of fun that I was able to appreciate it. You also highlighted J. Jonah Jameson speaking to his bed. Come to bed, Jonah. I think I'd prefer to stand.
it was like
So
you can't
there's
stand all night.
yeah, you can't stand all night. And the Spider-Man characters always more lighthearted and fun than the X-Men day to day. But and we do get some just really
Oh,
stupid interactions. Go
I,
ahead.
I know. I gotta admit, one of the reasons I did a grab of this was and I was hoping my dog maybe would on cue jump up, because this completely reminds me of one of my dogs and how his tongue is always hanging out sideways.
Yeah.
So I got some Iggy Pop vibes from this. But I
Also,
enjoyed
shout
this.
out to Dogpool because
Yes.
it's
Oh my God.
yeah,
Yeah. How could I leave
yeah,
him out? But I thoroughly enjoyed this partnership. I have to admit, like this was kind of Deadpool Wolverine kind of territory in terms
yeah.
of the
I agree.
comedy, and it wasn't as cutesy or kitty. I thought it was kind of fun. It was like I don't know, Spider Man's Bizarro basically, which
Yeah,
I'm okay with. I kind of wanted a little more of him, to be honest.
yeah, no, I think that dealing with some of the more absurdities are fun. Like you also have J. Jonah Jameson arguing with this like eagle
Chicken head.
head or whatever. Yeah, this chicken head. I'm not a human. I'm a demon goblin, just like you, chicken head. And that's a perfect example. And I'll bring that image back up for a visual audience. That's a perfect example of like why I'm able to have fun with a story like this. There's a lot of stuff going on that it's like maybe you don't buy into it, but the strength of these characters
Well, and look at the
who,
drawing of this too.
yeah,
Like, I mean, talk about like, and because the art veered wildly in this collection,
yeah,
but like J. Jonah Jameson's face and all the lines, and then like that single tear it looks like coming down Chicken Head's face.
yes,
I mean, this is just one of those, like, even if you didn't see the titles, like the whole story is there in the drawing.
yeah, no, and some of this stuff is great the way that they've expressed it, and that's the strength of having a 65-year history with characters like J. Jonah Jameson and obviously the heroes. And I think that they're definitely, because of the nature of a crossover like this, Eric, there's definitely times where my interest wanes a little bit, and I found that the actual Venom issues, I'm like, all right, can we get back to the main story eventually? Yes, we can. But that I think that in general it all kind of works. It's just that maybe that was a moment that I wasn't feeling quite as much. Did you find any characters, specifically my example being Venom, when I wasn't checked out. I didn't skip. I didn't speed read. But it's almost like you look at the clock when you know that school's almost over for the day. And then you look again a minute later, hoping that more than a minute has passed, but it hasn't. It's like I can feel how many pages I have left before I get to the next chapter. Did you experience any of that?
Well, I think with the X-Men, it was great seeing Jean and Cyclops. I'm always like the Summers brothers. I think are fascinating, but it felt like the other X-Men there took up space. It felt almost like maybe they should have not even been kind of full X-Men. It could have just been a few of them showing up in another title.
Yeah.
And but that being said, I did enjoy Madeline and Jean's scenes, and really X-Men 97 covered similar ground as well this season. I think that dynamic is really fascinating to me. Yeah, I agree about Venom. I also maybe I'm not sure if I really enjoy Venom as a lead. I
Yeah.
think it's an issue I've had in the movies. I find maybe he would just be better as a sidekick or as part of a rogues gallery, because I find putting him front and center not so interesting. Although I did like the dynamic of his son. I thought, and this is something I'm always a sucker for. I have to admit, as a fan, is I like when it's like younger characters who get this power that they're not quite they haven't fully figured out.
Right.
And so I think, him going against his own father. Although I think the thread of Venom, of Eddie's whole thing, got lost a bit. Like when he became the big red Venom, sort of more like a Carnage Venom.
Yeah.
I started to, I wasn't quite looking at my watch at that point, but I found myself not really understanding where Eddie was, um, in his like
Yeah,
trajectory and the
no, I
storytelling.
agree. You definitely kind of get lost in the venomness of it, and of course, speaking of Venom, Venom: The Last Dance in theaters Thursday, October 24th, and be looking for us to do a special episode somewhere shortly thereafter of our show Marvel Movie Talk, and but the real crown will
Craven.
go to Craven December 14th. But we're getting ahead of
They're
ourselves, aren't
releasing
we?
that in December. That means they actually believe it in a little.
Yeah, I don't know if it's actually going to come out in December. We'll
I bet
see, but
they,
that's its release date. I mean,
and
you
then
got to
that
put it on
seems
the
more like
yeah.
coming this January 5th.
The opposite of my feeling about kind of slogging through the Venom stuff is when we got to visit with Kamala Khan,
Always a pleasure.
and her name has become so much more complicated for me to say, because now that I know that our vice president's name is Kamala, but her name is Kamala. And I know our buddy Daniel Drew always tries to help me remember which one, but I usually try to call either one of them the wrong thing. And getting to spend time with Kamala Khan, I do really enjoy that character. And I wonder when we may see her again on the screen. Probably like Young Avengers. I'd love them to do another season of her show, but hard to predict that sort of a thing. So when we get to see her in here, getting to see her, kind of go up against some of these bigger threats, interacting with these characters, I was perfectly content to maybe be a couple steps behind, a little bit lost, because I just really enjoy her and her embiggen powers, which are so different than what she has in the movies and TV show. What did you think about a character like Kamala Khan, who is a much newer character for a couple of old men like us, but getting to actually spend some time with her?
Neither of us. We grew up a long time ago, and yeah, she was not in our diet back when we were but
No.
younger lads. She is definitely one of Marvel's gems. So a
Great.
newer character that they introduced that I think has so many of the same qualities that made you and I such fans of Peter Parker. She's human. She's relatable, and she's the one who seems to be having some fun with this, and still trying to figure it out. And I like she read in this a little bit older than she has in the movies and some
Yeah,
of the
that's
other
fair.
things.
Yeah.
She's more like a college aged Kamala, right? That's how you pronounce her name. Um,
Correct.
and the embiggen hands versus right the powers, which because the powers in the movie and the TV shows is kind of
It's
generic.
basically Carol's powers.
Yeah. And it's powers we've seen, but the idea of like just her hands getting large, and at one point her whole body does, but it doesn't look like Mr. Fantastic. That's the thing too. It's like
No.
it's
Yeah.
not Reed Richards. It's not Plastic Man. It's real specific to her, and I like that her family shows up. I like that it deals with the mosque. Um, and
Yeah.
even I gotta admit, I really enjoyed the moments of her and Spider Man when he basically, it's a little was it a little cheesy when he's like, "You're a hero, not just for the Muslim community, for all of us." Maybe, but I enjoyed that, and
Yeah.
because I like her so much that I enjoy a moment of her feeling like she did something right and she did okay.
Yeah, and obviously, going back to I don't even know how many months ago, but we did the initial run of Ms. Marvel, the Kamala Khan Ms. Marvel on Geekscape Book Club, and I would be happy to visit another era of her run. They've done a few things with her in the last few years to again make it a little bit more consistent with the movie version.
Mhm.
They've embraced her being a mutant, I believe, and dealt with Krakoa and all that stuff before that was over. So, yeah, I think calling her a gem is very accurate, and that's kind of the perfect way to describe her. It's fun to get to spend time with her. And I know if our buddy Daniel Drew checks this out, he is definitely going to agree with that. And it does give us moments of things that maybe we didn't know that we're like, oh yeah, I would like to see this interaction between Kamala Khan and Venom,
Oh,
just
right,
sort of,
right.
some of these pairings are not necessarily the way that, if we were doing our draft of character team ups and we were doing our sweet 16 of how to pair these up. I don't think I would have put money on Kamala Khan and Eddie Brock, but it'll make for a great Elite Eight.
Yeah, and also too something about these scenes that I like was she was, and this is, I think this is Eddie's son, isn't it?
I
I think,
believe so. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. And so she's trying to stop him from doing something he's going to regret. For the
yeah,
let's see, how would you have felt if you stabbed your own father in the heart and he just died
yeah.
for the rest of your life? How would you feel about that? But there's something to be said about her hands getting large and trying to, like when you have a kid that's like having a temper tantrum or you're trying to control an
Sure.
animal, the idea of like kind of you hold them close. So yeah, this moment I thought particularly interesting, and again a moment where I was kind of enjoying this element of the Venom storyline, the idea of the bloodline, because again it goes back to that idea of one of the big overriding themes of the whole dark web series.
Yeah, no, I absolutely I agree with you on that. And again, it's the strength of a character like Kamala Khan
Mhm.
to be able to just sort of enjoy those moments, brief as though they might be at times. I think that it's definitely fun to get to see, and you touched on it in the beginning, but for me, the the crown jewel of this entire series, it was, even if I had hated it, which I did not, there were things that just left me scratching my head or maybe wanted to move along. No matter how I felt about the rest of it, it all would have been worth it for Spidey and his amazing friends. No, Spider-Man and his amazing friends, not Spidey and his amazing friends. That's Miles Morales and Spider-Gwen, Ghost Spider.
No, no, I have to
Uh,
admit, I haven't watched this original cartoon in years. I know there's the Spidey and His Amazing Friends that you
yes,
watch with
which
your
my
kids,
my daughter watches it. Yeah,
but
yeah,
have you revisited this Spider-Man, the Spider-Man and His
yes,
Amazing Friends? How does it
yes.
hold up?
Not well,
I can imagine.
but the best episodes are one called Seven Little Superheroes. It has a lot of guest stars. It has Captain America. It has the Submariner. It has Doctor Strange. It has Kazar's wife, Shayna or Sheena. I don't even remember what her name is. I'm sorry, Kazar fans. Uh,
Lazar?
Kazar of the Savage Land.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So,
I was
and that
saying
one's
his
pretty
wife's
cool.
name
And
is.
there's two episodes with the X-Men. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So, some of it, it's a very different era for superhero storytelling. It's way closer on the chart, on the spectrum of superhero cartoons. It's probably right next to Super Friends. It's a little better than that. A little better than Plastic Man, but it's nowhere near X-Men animated series, Spider-Man
No,
animated
no,
series, Batman animated series.
no.
We'll
It's
shout
just
we'll
it's
shout
the
out.
single A team, or maybe the double A.
Yeah,
Maybe the
but
Mexican League, but not.
but that is what really made me love superheroes, was that show,
Oh yeah.
was Spider-Man and his amazing friends. So
Well, because
the
they were
fact that
cool.
these,
The combination of fire and
yeah,
ice. That was, I
yeah,
mean, when I was a little kid, I didn't need much else.
and by the way, Firestar is a character very much like Harley Quinn, created for an animated series and then introduced into continuity.
Mhm.
Uncanny X-Men 193, Angelica Jones makes her first appearance as a member of the White Queen's Hellions, and then she had a 4-issue miniseries that many people find to be a missed opportunity. It kind of put her on the bench for a little while, unfortunately, but and it's a character that I think does work really well, and I like the combination of her and Iceman, and it worked fine in the context of the story, but this is one of those ones where even if it didn't, you would hear no complaints, literally no complaints from me, because it brings back the memories of my childhood and getting Spider-Man and his amazing friends all running from the opening of the show. Yeah. And Aunt May's dog, Miss Lion, being one of the amazing friends. And
well, Wonder Mutt in Super Friends still.
Oh yeah. So
So many problems with that.
I just getting to see these characters, because I can't imagine that even in comics it'll often make sense for the three of them to be together doing something. And in this story, don't they say let's never team up again?
Friends. But he does call them his amazing.
He does
friends.
call them his amazing friends. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. He does call them that.
But clearly, that was fan service of the highest degree, but a real specific fan service for.
No,
I would say people our age.
Yeah, I was going to say fan service in modern comics is very rarely for me. The movies, like we talked about some of the fan service in Daredevil, Deadpool and Wolverine, basically being for people like us. And, the comics, it's usually like, well, we're not going to really refer back to something from 40 plus years ago. All right, let's do it, So, I couldn't have been happier with this. And even though you weren't that familiar with the show, you watched the show, just not recently, right?
What, Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends?
Correct, yeah.
Oh, yeah. This is what I grew up on, too. I was always watching that as a kid. I just haven't seen it since I was a kid.
Right. It's on Disney Plus, and I think you have to kind of choose carefully to figure out what you want to watch. There is an episode actually that's not on Disney Plus. Years ago, my wife bought them for me on Amazon, and I watched them all, and some of it was kind of fun. There's a Red Skull episode that has I think it tells it tells his story accurately. There's a lot of Nazi imagery in not a complimentary way at all, but I think that they probably now it's like that's for the History Channel, not for Disney Plus. So so some of it aged so poorly, and when you first asked that question, I kind of forgot. I'm only just remembering as I'm talking. Oh yeah, there is that one episode. But look, I mean, that's who the Red Skull is. Let's not pretend that he's not the guy who's trying to bring about the Fourth Reich. I mean, he's just like, hold on, that's Hydra, and Hydra kind of gets lost in the shuffle a little bit. The
Hydra's more extreme than the Nazis in essence. So listen, I mean, I wouldn't be comfortable around the Hydras. I'd have to be careful throwing the Yiddish around.
And yes, right, exactly. Yes, you would just be up on the roof. Like,
okay. I completely think, and feel free to disagree, I think this is a reference to John Lovitz. I want it to be, maybe I should say.
Hello. All right. What is this? So this is
I just wanted to eat people.
Is that so wrong? Yeah, well that's his Harvey Firestein.
But it has to be.
I just want to be loved. Is that so wrong? Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and that's actually why I shared it because I'm like, oh yeah, I did love that this spoke to you in that way, that we got that, and I understand that I have a third batch and
Oh,
a
it's a very
fourth
small batch.
batch of
Oh, they're
well,
very
the
small batches. Hey, listen,
there
you do the batches you need, not the batches that I send. It's what you need. It's about your
right.
needs, son.
Exactly, and I think it's
Hey.
important to share the third batch in the sense that it does feature a character we haven't talked about, Mr. Sinister, and
He only shows up for a second. I mean, he might have
yeah,
been
I
in
know.
some more of the titles we didn't
I
see.
I think that's more setting up because they did do an actual Inferno, I believe. After this, they did
Mm.
another Inferno, and uh, I tell you, Chris Claremont couldn't have been any happier when I said to him in an interview that yeah, I know they did Inferno again, and I know they did the Trial of Magneto again. But I've already read those, and I know that they were better when I read them. So no, I'm not that interested in the new Trial of Magneto, the retrial, the appellate court hearing, the trial of Magneto, not for what he originally stood trial for, but for kicking in a hotel room in Las Vegas and trying to get back his memorabilia because he's very proud of the Heisman Trophy that he won. Eric Lenscher. Yeah, it's but some great imagery here, and we've got Jean basically slapping Madeline,
Yeah.
and we haven't talked enough about Ileana in this. So when we close, I'll kind of talk about her and what I like about her character and sort of the mythology they built around her. But they did give Madeline an opportunity to she's gonna say it to me, my X-Men. And
To
I was just like,
me.
all right, I like that.
Right now, okay, of what would you say is maybe it's Excelsior, but like what's your favorite Avengers Assemble, Hulk Smash, it's clobbering time. Do you have a favorite
It's clobbering,
catchphrase?
100%. It's clobbering time because that's what it is. You
Yeah.
know, yes, Hulk smash that happens, but it's all Benji Grimm deciding like, all right, I'm not built like a pile of rocks for nothing.
Right,
It's
right.
clobbering time, and look, that's the way they talk in the Yancey Street Gang. And yeah, I do love that. And as we're talking about Ben Grimm, our buddy David Brody made sure that we all saw the set photo, the leak of the set photo of the
Mhm.
thing on set. Obviously, there's a lot of excitement about the Fantastic Four, but and I think that you're talking about sort of the very different art styles. This is almost like those special editions that are like painted,
Yeah.
uh, and
Oh,
we're just sort of dealing with. I almost called that Black Ball, but that's Cyclops, isn't
no,
it?
no, no, no. There's Cyclops, and then also I thought Havoc was Black Bolt, but it was Havoc. It was
Yeah, I know.
yeah, yeah, because they
And
had this. Oh, if you can go back one,
to the dogs or before the
yeah,
dogs?
okay. The idea of how do they keep him from blasting everything with his eyes? He's surrounded by puppies, so that he doesn't open his
Yeah,
eyes.
I
I
do remember thinking that's so twisted. Oh my gosh, Jackknife didn't even realize you were in here watching. I do like Colossus by the White Wolf, and I believe Nightcrawler would say "Ongle Blech" or something that meant I think it meant "Oh my God" or something. I might be
There's
wrong,
also,
but
of course, oh my stars and garters.
"Oh my Stars and Garters" is a fantastic one. That's very true. Yeah, but yeah, Colossus by the White Wolf is a good one, and Storm always had just some really cool sounding mystical
Yeah, yeah.
stuff that she would lean on. But yeah, the puppies to keep him from blasting, I thought
And
was a
the one
really
trying
nice
to go
touch.
get his visor. He's like,
Yeah,
"How's he doing?" Not great, and he takes a nap.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I did
exactly.
enjoy. I remember seeing as a kid. I want to say it was a bit on like SCTV involving a toilet that was like walking down the streets at night like a horror film, and this totally gave me those vibes. So again, some of this was really goofy, but then some moments did land for me. Avenge our fallen comrades, a bunch of
Yeah.
toilets. That
Yeah, it's
and I laughed at that. I
it's
won't lie.
it's like a very like Ren and Stimpy style
Yeah, yeah,
aesthetic. You know, it's this
exactly.
like demonic, but like definitely trying to speak to the children. And
Idiot.
also, this is our final images, and our apologies to our audio only audience.
To our radio
Some
listeners, we
To our
apologize.
radio listeners, call
Yep.
out Gonkwin 5679, and you'll be able to listen on the party line, and we'll be seeing you again later in the month. But this is sort of what you're talking about earlier. This is Madeline Pryor in her
What
Goblin Queen outfit
or
as
as my dad would call it, her Gotkas, which is Yiddish for pretty much what it sounds like.
yeah. Well, she's definitely got her gakkas out, and there they are. And yeah, I think that it is the classic look, so I do like that, you know. And she's back to being the Goblin Queen, and Ileana even says, "Hell, I almost took a knee," and that isn't even my least favorite Cyclops costume, not the one I'm always talking about. Always talking
I
about
know
the
this is
one with
one
the
you hate
big, the
more.
one with the big dumb helmet. I don't love that one, but it's compared to the big dumb helmet, it's a
And
little bit better.
now that I've been part of the Blatt team for a while, I knew as I was reading this, I'm like, oh yeah, Christian's gonna hate this costume.
Yeah, but obviously, we're getting some Kamala, and it's almost like an anime style that she's presented in. Just some of the visuals really are great, and really getting to watch Kamala deal with all these demons.
And they
I
send her
did find
back.
that, yeah,
They're so annoyed with her, they send her back willingly. I
yeah.
thought was
That's
a
the whole
great
point,
joke.
is that they don't want to be with the cranky teenager. You know, I thought
I
that.
live with two of them. I get it. No offense if you're listening, boys.
I tell you. So yeah, and you know the initial Inferno is just sort of dealing with an uprising in Limbo, and Ileana Rasputin, magic of the New Mutants, trying to deal with it. Within a few years, they de-age her back to being a child, and they take the magic out of her, and that was a tremendous loss. I tell you, it didn't slow down my disinterest in the X-Men to not have Ileana around anymore. Her and Kitty as like these best friends. I always thought that dynamic worked really well. And, you know, just sort of the horror of you know, she steps into a portal, has a 4-issue miniseries, gets yanked back what feels like a second later to the X-Men, and she's a teenager, and basically this demon princess queen of Limbo having killed Belasco. It's a whole thing, and it's just such a dark, like what she has to endure, and these evil versions of the characters. And we weren't really doing this show at the time. We weren't doing either of these shows, not you and I together. But say what you want about the New Mutants film that we got. Anna Taylor-Joy, aka the Queen's Gambit, as Magic, was great. I liked seeing her. I loved the Lockheed puppet. I love the fact that we got Lockheed, and it's kind of like, I think that this story and this usage of characters is far better than the New Mutants movie. I know, hot take, but I find it to be much more enjoyable than that. But there are times it is, you know, you're talking about in some ways the characters reverting to their cinematic and on-screen sort of personas.
Right.
For me, this story was a little bit like when you watch the movies and you have to kind of, you know, pick and choose, take or leave some things, try to forget entire series like Secret Invasion, you know, things like that. And Steve Mayer's in here. How's it going, guys? Are you guys fans of the Fantastic Four? Yes, we are. We were talking about Ben Grimm before, and we're looking forward to the new flick very much. Eric and I are of the firm belief that there's only been one good Fantastic Four movie so far, and it is the Roger Corman produced version featuring our friend Joseph Culp as Doctor Doom. And on this channel, you can find an interview we did with him. Gosh, that was like 3 months ago now.
Yeah.
I don't even, where'd the summer go? I don't even know. But thanks for checking in, Steve. And I'll tell Steve, like I tell everyone else, please like, subscribe, and right down there.
I have no idea if I'm pointing to the right place
no,
at all. For
you're
all I know, I'm
pointing close enough.
cancel.
Yeah, and subscribe to Geekscape for this show, for our weekly Marvel movie talk show, which I will tease our new episode in a moment. Don't worry, you're not in it. You haven't forgotten to put something on your calendar. But do you have a final thought about Dark Web, Eric?
My final thoughts are maybe a bit uneven. It doesn't have the sort of spine I think we've had in a bunch of other titles we've read as part of this book club. But it does remind you like how deep the stable is for Marvel. So even as, let's say, like some of the characters might be getting along in the tooth in the cinematic universe, I mean, just front and center, like Kamala Khan
there you go,
is a terrific character, and that idea of the Young Avengers. When I read something like this, that's when I get excited about the possibilities of that. The idea that like there are these like smaller characters kind of peppered throughout that could be really interesting to explore more, TV or film, either way. And I think maybe a little more Venom than we needed. It was pretty crowded. I don't know if
but not in the way that Spider-Man 3 had more Venom than we needed.
Right. But I think maybe the storyline maybe it didn't quite need to be as expansive as it was in terms of how many characters got involved. But it's very much worth the read, and and I think the fact that it does kind of go to so many different places was pretty interesting. I scratched my head a lot, but I was always curious where this thing was going. So no, I think it was a good choice. I'm glad I read something so modern too, and read a modern.
I thought that it made sense, and not just because I already had it in the house from the library. Which, thank you for returning it, by the way. I noticed it disappear from my list of
the Burbank
books.
Library didn't send a guy to break your kneecap, so I was worried about that.
No, but I did get a call that the envelope was a little light this week, so I had to make up for it. But in any case, and I thought it would be fun too, because a lot of modern stuff I read is set in earlier time periods.
Mm-hmm.
Claremont will have a new series. In fact, he has one right now with Wolverine. But he, I definitely read a lot of that stuff. And Steve pointed out that he already liked and subscribed. Jackknife says finally Steve is here. So we appreciate everybody who checked out this show. And if you hadn't read the story, I think it's worth a read. I think it is a little uneven, but I think the trade paperback is the way to go, which you can also read digitally. You're able to get it that way. So what I guess we should give is our initial programming note that we'll be back the week of September 23rd, and we'll take a break from the big two. And this was your suggestion, and we're going to cover Ghost World, which I've never read, but I did see the movie for. So I'm looking forward to reading that, and I'll probably rewatch the movie because I saw it once in the theater, liked it, but never really had the feeling of like, oh, I got to check it out again.
I remember Shia LaBeouf, as I call him, or Shia LaBeouf. He ran afoul
the young ingenue, Shia LaBeouf.
He ran afoul of Klaus. Is it Daniel Klaus, the writer of Ghost World?
I believe so. Yeah.
I'll see if I can find the picture I took of he hired a skywriter to say, "I'm sorry, Daniel Klaus," because he took one of his ideas and made a short without his permission. The problem is Daniel Klaus does not live in LA. He lives like up north. So he hired a skywriter for nothing.
He wrote the wrong part of the sky.
And I think two men of our age focused on a book about two 18, 19-year-olds females makes complete sense. Hopefully we can mansplain a thing or two about the story.
Yeah, I might. You might have made me realize right now that I have to drag Katie or someone else into that one. So yeah,
your wife? Bring your wife in. Let her come to the dark side.
She doesn't want to do this. There's nothing she'd want to do less than sit here and
One more
to,
reason.
But in any case, we might be able to, maybe a movie one day. So quick programming note for our live audience watching us on a Thursday night. Marvel Movie Talk will be back tomorrow, Friday, April 30th at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific.
August.
What did I say?
April.
Started with an A.
You think about April Imhold again in a minute.
I am thinking about what happened to somebody in that world today. But August 30th is tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. I will be doing Marvel Movie Talk, spending the entire show speaking with editor, writer, artist extraordinaire, the great Al Milgrom, who is responsible for one of, no, I'm going to say it. He's responsible for my favorite miniseries ever, Kitty Pryde and Wolverine. He provided all the art for all 6 issues of Kitty Pryde and Wolverine. He also, the reason why I struck up a conversation with him at LA Comic-Con, at San Diego Comic-Con, was he drew the first superhero comic that I ever bought, which was Peter Parker's Spectacular Spider-Man number 89. I had him sign that for me at San Diego Comic-Con. He also created the character, the Spot, who factors very much into the Spider-Verse second film and then the next one. And I will talk to him tomorrow about that. I don't know how much of the conversation I had with him at Comic-Con he's able to tell, but we talked a little bit about character rights and payments and things. And he's well taken care of thanks to that, thanks to what the rules are. So I very much am excited to talk to him. And if I'm talking about Al and I'm talking about the Spot, I can, for my visual audience, provide this background right here where you can see the Spot directly. I think his name is actually just Spot. I'm getting confused now, but that's also Data's cat on Next Generation. So you do understand that sometimes these things can get a little bit more confusing than they need to be. But he also, Al Milgrom, provided the art for Secret Wars 2, which means he created the face.
The Beyonder himbo.
The Beyonder that basically looks like David Hasselhoff. And I'm excited to talk to him about that. He had a run on Hulk that sort of came about very abruptly. It was the 3rd creative team in the course of, I think, a year. John Byrne took it over for just a few months, and then I think he tapped out to go do Superman. And so Al did some very memorable stories. And so Jackknife is saying Mike Allred created Spot. I don't know who wrote those issues, but Al created the design for Spot. So he definitely is one of the creators of Spot because he designed the look of the character. And I know he drew Spot's first appearance. So I know because I talked to him about it. And you'll be able to see that conversation Friday, August 30th at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. Of course, you'll be able to check out the archive version anytime. And there'll also be the audio version posted probably shortly thereafter. So I'm very excited to be able to get a chance to talk to him as someone who is responsible for, some of my earliest and fondest superhero memories is the great Al Milgrom. What were you going to say, kind sir?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, can you please ask him about the Beyonder's moon boots? I had a lot of questions even as a kid reading him and his representation as a character. So many questions about that.
There are a lot of questions about the Beyonder. I don't know that I might, I'll try to reference the moon boots, but I also had him
that's
sign
great.
Spectacular Spider-Man number 100. I always loved this one because he drew the 100 in there. So, Jackknife has
John Travolta.
John Travolta as the Beyonder. And Steve, I'm going to
original
give you some homework. So you asked our thoughts on Robert Downey Jr. playing Doom. You'll have to go into our back catalog and check out our episode right after our emergency episode, right after San Diego Comic-Con, where we spent a good chunk of the episode talking about that decision. And the short version is no one seems to think he's going to give a bad performance, but a lot of people are just like, yeah, but why? So sometimes that's what you get to. And in our next episode, I'll be able to confirm for sure when people in the LA area, if you're so inclined, you will be able to sit and watch us do an episode of Geekscape Book Club at LA Comic-Con the weekend of October 4th, 5th, and 6th. At the moment, it looks like it would probably be on the Saturday, but we will make sure to let everybody know, and follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ. And I will make sure that I let everybody know, especially anybody in the LA area or anybody who just plans to be at LA Comic-Con, know where they'll be able to see us. And we will unveil the title, but it will be one of the characters featured in Deadpool and Wolverine. Might even be one of the title characters. So that'll be something that we'll be getting to do at the beginning of October. And hopefully we'll be able to bring some familiar faces there. Eric Conner, as we start to roll out the tarp and cover the field until the next time we need to play, next time we need to suit up, let everybody know where they can find you.
Oh, go say hi to me, Count Eric Conner over at X and Insta. Let's see what else. If you're in the LA Burbank area, Saturday, September 7th, part of the Burbank Cultural Arts, we're doing a massive fall festival, live music and screening of Nightmare Before Christmas. Should be awesome. So you could see me in person. I'll sign anything you bring, for the right price. I work cheap.
Yes, of course. And I do believe that my family will be there. We hope to see the movie, but that's a game time decision. I will say, I hope the weather's more cooperative than it was in 2023. Eric.
If it's not, they will find my body in the LA River.
But as I mentioned, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram, ChristianDMZ. Please tune in to Marvel Movie Talk tomorrow, where I talk to Al Milgram, or look for it after the fact. And Jackknife's got places to go because he's now telling us to wrap it up. We're wrapping it up. It's a slow, meandering wrap up. So I hope everybody enjoyed the conversation about Dark Web, and anybody who hasn't read it, please check it out. And join us next month for Ghost World. And as long as they keep writing them, we'll keep reading them. See you in September.